Welcome to the ASA podcast, where we focus on subcontractors, the construction industry, and the issues and people making an impact. The ASA podcast is brought to you by the American Subcontractors Association and the Foundation of the American Subcontractors Association. Hey everybody, welcome back to ASA podcast. I'm Mike Klein, your host, and today I have Mike Oscar with me to talk about the ASA's legislative fly-in. So Mike, let's rock and roll.
Yes, thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for your time. I'll be very quick about this, but I think it's important. You may or may not have heard about our Capitol Hill fly-in to Washington, D.C., which usually occurs the second week of June. The reason I picked that time is not because it's hot, not because it's the height of construction season, but it's a time where I know members of Congress are going to be in town, and I know that I can get effective meetings for you because things are hopping. One of the things that you learn in Washington, D.C. is that everything is dependent on holidays, and they wait as they can to be for a holiday to come up. So you have Memorial Day, and then you have 4th of July. So between Memorial Day and June 19th, which is still, it's a new holiday. It was just brought into our lexicon here in DC in the last couple of years. But generally speaking, that second week of June, they're in session. So that's why I do it, because I want to make sure that the time that you take away from your family, from your work, and from your employees to come to Washington is successful. And last year's fly-in, was yet again another tremendous success. We had 27 Senate meetings and 23 House meetings in one day. And we do that on Wednesday. And the reason we do that is because if there's one day that a week, Wednesday is generally the day that the members of Congress are in town, because they might be flying in even Tuesday or Tuesday night, and they might be flying out Thursday or Thursday afternoon if there's no final votes on Friday. So Wednesday's the day we have those meetings, which I mentioned, over 50 meetings in one day, 27 and 23, and we were able to meet with 4 members of Congress. One might say, well, why are we light with members of Congress than we are with staff? Well, I learned a long time ago as a former staffer, and I have 2 with Shannon and Kate, who both worked on the Hill as well. We've got collective experience of over 30 plus years of working on the Hill. All the work that happens, and even though they're younger, generally speaking, it happens with the staff. And as former staffers, that's really, they're the worker bees, and that's the rapport you really have to make, because members of Congress are effective. Obviously, they're the ones carrying the voting card, and they're the ones that can vote, and they have the influence and power, but it's their staff that are your first point of entry into that office. And if you build confidence with them, you'll build the members' confidence. And so we did have, for example, like Representative Stauber, who's the chair of our, of the construction procurement caucus in Congress. He chairs that. He has a very strong understanding of the importance of small business, especially when it comes to payment issues. So he chairs that caucus, and he meets with us. He tells us, he's met us at dinner, he's met us in his office, and he's worked very hard on legislation he's offered, which has been authored on our behalf for the American Subcontractors Association to deal with prompt payment. He also serves on the Small Business Committee, which is relevant, again, to our issues when it comes to subcontracting. So you coming in, and we've had 33 attendees last year. We generally get anywhere between 35 to 40 members that come in, so 33 is a good number. And we go up on the Hill, usually come in Tuesday afternoon. We do a fun event. This year's fun event was to do a tour of the National Portrait Gallery. And the tour was led by a docent who gave us a portrait gallery overview of all the American presidents. And it was mind-boggling. Our contractors loved it. I think if the docent went on for another hour, they would have stuck around. And that may not be something you think a subcontractor would be interested in attending, but we had a healthy group, and it was just the information that she supplied us behind not only making that portrait, but how the member, wanted to be perceived, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a really fun event. We've done the Library of Congress. We've gone to a Capitol tour. We've done the FBI. We've done Folger's Library. We do things just to kind of whet the appetite. And I do that specifically because I know I have members flying in from the western part of the country, like California and Washington, and I don't want them just sitting around. So we do a fun event, and then we have a prep session, which we go over. I send everything in advance. So we have a prep call, but I know everybody's busy, so they may not participate in the prep call. I send them all the materials in advance. Well, in advance, the only thing they don't get before arriving in Washington is their schedule. But they have all the materials. But again, I know you're busy. So we then have, after the fun event, we then come together and have a prep session for what our priorities are. And those priorities are set by the GRC committee for the fly. And there's usually about 5 or 6 of them. We go over those priorities. We sometimes have industry experts. This year we had a tax expert come from the Small Business Legislative Committee to give an overview of the tax provisions that are coming up for sunsetting, if you will, in 2025. And then we go through those provisions, and we had him present, but we then go through all the priorities, and then we have a Q&A amongst the flying attendees. Sometimes we get repeat offenders that really enjoy coming up to the Hill, which is great, but oftentimes we get new members coming in as well. This year it was a mixed bag of new and old, so that was great. So we had some mentors, if you will, that take up some of the young bloods that came in to take on the Hill. And we went through the 50 meetings, and usually a subcontractor gets between 7 and 8 meetings. But prior to that, let me pause. After the prep session, before we go up on the Hill on Wednesday, on Tuesday, we have a really nice dinner at the Monocle, where we have a conversation not only amongst the attendees, but we also have speakers come and address the group. And we have some good cheer, some good fun, some good food. And then the next morning we take the Hill. And then on Wednesday, when we're all finished, we wet our whistle after sweating and walking about 3 to 5 miles on the halls of Congress. We go to the Dubliner and have a beer, a cold beer, some appetizers, and then many of our members either fly back or they stay and fly out the next day. So it's a really good opportunity for us to allow for members of Congress. We make up 3/4 of the construction industry as subcontractors. So it's good for those members of Congress and their staff to hear about these issues. You are the economic engine in your local community. And, I realize that there is a financial aspect. We try to keep the registration fee very low. We're actually one of the lowest out of all the construction associations for coming to DC. We pride ourselves in that. And that covers the cost of our minuscule administrative expenses for materials going out, et cetera, but also for our reception. And this year actually we had a reception dinner, but this year we actually had the reception after the Dubliner, sponsored by the DC Metro. Thank you, Ike, and your team for doing that. But that's a very minimal registration fee. You do have to cover on your own your flight cost and your hotel costs, which we keep very minimal. We do have the hotel, which is right on the compound, if you will, of the Capitol, so it's easy to walk. Once you get here, you put on your walking shoes. You've got to be in shirt and tie, of course, and suit coat and Western business attire for both men and women. But we try to keep it very succinct, and we try to take advantage of your time here with these members and make it as effective and useful as possible.
Are the dates set for the 2025 fly-in yet?
Yes, for that will be, I believe, June 10th and 11th of 2025, but I have to triple check that. But I believe, yes, those dates we're doing the same time frame as we've done last year. We've actually had other industry partners that are partners not only to outside of ASA, but within ASA, want to come and join us on our fly-in. And so we had a great debate about deciding that we were very humbled by that, but we decided we would stay singular just at ASA. Also, too, that the relationships we build with staff is incredibly important. This past February, we had an awesome opportunity that came out of our fly-in. Andrew Christ, a tremendous guy, who is a subcontractor by trade out in Kansas, works on federal contracting issues, has had an outstanding change order. I said had because it was $250,000 of a change order that hadn't been paid. That paid change order, I'm told, is still outstanding, and here we are about almost 7 months later, and
Wow.
it's about $900,000, still hasn't been paid. But because I knew he had this problem, I got a call from the Small Business Committee. I mentioned Representative Stolberg, he's on the committee, but the chair is Chair Williams from the Fort Worth area. He's very familiar of our chapters in Texas, and he had a staffer who we've met with and talked about subcontractor issues, specifically dealing with prompt pay and change order. And he asked us to provide a testifier to testify at their hearing on February the 7th. And we were able to do that. And Andrew Christ came in. He did a tremendous job. Now, we did spend about 6 hours working back and forth on his 5-minute presentation. His written submission can be longer, but his oral testimony has to be within 5 minutes. They actually have a stoplight in the hearing room, and it's just as a traffic light, red means stop, green means go. And I think Andrew felt that all this prep wasn't that necessary, but when he got into the hearing room, and he heard the instructions from the chair who said, "I'll cut your mic off at the end of 5 minutes. So if you haven't finished your thought, you're done." And reality set in pretty quickly when he received those instructions from the chair. But Andrew did a great job presenting on his concerns on behalf of our concerns of change order and the importance of pieces of legislation that we had not only addressed in the hearing, but also in our fly-in, which are now obviously priorities within our legislative priorities for 2024 through the GRC committee. He was able to testify. He did a great job. And surprisingly, while we were at SubXL a month later, you know, I often say Washington is the Hollywood for ugly people. Not that Andrew's ugly, but the fact is there's a lot of choreography going on.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going with, because it's like Hollywood behind the scenes. And I think he did such a great job in his testimony that word got out that this change order was of concern. And he did say in his testimony that the advocate that he had out of all the federal agency was the Small Business Administration. So sure enough, a month later, while we were at SubXL, he got a call from the SBA administrator, and she wanted to come and visit his facility and wanted to hear his concerns. So she actually went to Kansas, met his staff, there's photos about it, social media posts, etc. But he made tremendous impact. And then from that discussion, just as recently as a couple weeks prior to the August recess, and then during the August recess, we've been working with Senator Ernst from Iowa, a Republican member who's ranking because the Democrats are in control in the Senate, so they're the majority, but the Republicans are ranking. So she's ranking. If the Republicans were in charge, she'd be the chair of the Small Business Committee. She's working with us on legislation that we want to address on change order reform that deals specifically with the Air Force and deals specifically with the Defense Department, because a lot of Andrew's work is done with the Air Force, specifically at the Colorado Springs, et cetera, dealing with change order reform. And prior to her talking to us, having heard about the Small Business Administrator visit and his testimony, they were able to put a meeting together with the Air Force Procurement Office, which was very intense. And they were able to have this powwow of where these concerns were for Andrew, and that's when Senator Ernst decided to dictate or to delegate her staff to dictate legislation. Vivian Lang's done a tremendous job. She's general counsel, working with Andrew and I and others within the Construction Industry Procurement Coalition to address this issue at the federal level with legislation. So stay tuned. But that all started with a fly-in. That took a young guy from Kansas who's a subcontractor working in federal contracting, brought him to D.C. On 2 occasions, developed a rapport with a Small Business Committee staffer small business committee staffer got a request from his boss saying, look, I want to deal with subcontracting issues. Ryan knew immediately, I got the guy for you. The chair loved him, knew of the work of ASA because he's from Texas, knows of the work that is happening with Bev and her husband, John, and her whole team, and said, bring him in. He qualified to be accepted by the committee. We worked. He gave a brilliant presentation. Then the small administrator came in. Then we got help from Senator Ernst's office, which got the Air Force involved to try to rectify his problem. And now we're having legislation drafted so that no subcontractor is similarly situated with such a outstanding change order amount of money for something that should have been paid for and dealt with a long time ago.
Yeah. It's the incredible power of showing up and making yourself known, and
Yes.
your team is outstanding at that, and I think it's important for the membership to understand just what a huge impact that is. And so if they do ever have a chance to participate in this fly-in, take the opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and I want to go back to my comment about the Hollywood for Ugly People. We had a sit down and photo op with Senator Cruz. Ted Cruz came from Texas, so the Texas chapters were just in. Actually, some of their spouses came; they were in their glory. Tom Friend did a great job, representing with Rusty, our chair at the time, and Bev and John. The whole crew was phenomenal, but they were starstruck when Ted Cruz came out from the Senate down to the Senate stairs and could have that photo op, and he actually talked to them and talked about his daughters and Bev's daughters. He's got twins, etc. I have twins. So anyway, it was right out of central casting, our group, and there's photos of that. But it's those relationships that are important. But again, that's all part of the fly, and we try to make it a really exciting experience. And I'll end where I began, and that is even the fun events that you might think that, oh, maybe construction contractors may not be interested in that. They love the natural portrait gallery. If she had our national portrait gallery, if the dosing would have gone on for another hour, I think our guys would have stuck around. So it was all good. But I really encourage you, if you have the time, give me 48 hours of your time, and I think it will be the best investment you've ever made.
Yeah, I think that's great. I do want to add one more thing then. The Andrew's testimony we do have available on our YouTube channel. So people who want to see that, if the links are not on our website, we'll put them there, or you could contact ASA and we'll make sure that you get access to it.
Thank you.
So, thanks, Mike. Good stuff. Thank you for listening to the ASA podcast. For more subcontractor-focused content, visit us at asaonline.com and fastcares.org. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.